everyone. How's everybody feeling right now? Good? Great. So hi everyone. Welcome to this webinar of our webinar series for all the fellows. And so my name is Maggie-san. I will be your moderator for today. I'm a Millennium Fellow as well as the campus director at New York University. So it's a pleasure for me to welcome you all to this webinar. The agenda for today is that we're going to have about a 20-minute Q&A with our incredible speaker here right now, Sam Gill, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A with everyone. So if you guys have any kind of question, just drop it in the chat while the webinar is going on so that we can pick the question and ask them to the speakers. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce Sam and just ask him to share about how he's feeling for this webinar. So Sam Gill here is the Senior Vice President as well as the Chief Program Officer at the Knight Foundation. In his role, he oversees all of Knight's grant-making program, and he also oversees Knight's research and assessment program, and he joined the foundation in 2015. And so previously, he served as a vice president of the Freeman Consulting, where he provided leadership for many of the firm's projects, including strategic planning and evaluation, as well as campaign and initiative management. And so Sam here earned a Bachelor of Art with honors from the University of Chicago and a Master of Philosophy in Politics from the University of Oxford, England, where he was a Rhodes Scholar. So yeah, do you mind just sharing a little bit about how you're feeling right now, Sam?
Honored. I'm feeling honored to be joining you all. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Great. And so for everyone who's just joining us right now, please just go ahead and introduce yourselves so that we can, keep everyone engaged. And you can just go ahead and do that in the chat box with your name, your country, your university, where you are right now, and how you're feeling about this webinar. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with a couple of questions for Sam here right now. So Sam, seeing that you have a really versatile experience in sort of strategic and initiative management, what would you say are the core values that's needed for the success of a social impact initiative?
Yeah, sure. Happy to talk about that. And again, really honored. It's amazing to see people from all over the world participating in this. And congrats to all of you for the work that you're doing on your own campuses, in your own lives, in your own communities. I don't know that there's sort of one set of values to have a social impact. I think that there are probably some ethical values that we can discuss, and then maybe what I would call personal virtues that I think enable people to have to be able to be more successful. I mean, I think some of the ethical values are probably centered on having a real commitment to community, a real commitment to other people, and with that, probably some idea of empathy and understanding. All this is a really hard time in a lot of countries right now to think about how to be tolerant of other people, but also to stand up for those who maybe other people aren't being tolerant of. So it's a challenging time. I also know that, for you all, there is a set of values around that underpin sustainable development goals that animate your work and your thinking. And that's a great set of values. And maybe one of the great opportunities of a fellowship like this is to be able to ask yourself, do I think these values do the job? Do I think these values are helping us to figure out what the most important problems are and which ways to solve them? And maybe not. Maybe the millennial sustainable development goals aren't going to work for the world that you all are in the process of inheriting. So that's a harder question, I think. In terms of some of the virtues, I think that really enable change makers. The CEO of our foundation, who's had a long career in business and also in philanthropy and social investment, started his career in the Peace Corps and then was a longtime media executive before becoming the Knight Foundation. He talks about sort of a few attributes of transformational leadership as vision, discovery, skill, tenacity, that these are the kinds of things that can help you succeed. And I don't think these are surprising to anyone here, but they really matter. You do need to look at the world as it is. That's really what discovery is all about. You need to have a vision to see what the world could be. You need to have skill either with yourself or with the people that you work with to be able to solve the challenges that you're taking on. You need to have the tenacity to stick with change, which often takes a really long time. And then at the end of the day, you also need a fifth virtue, which is courage. Courage to see solutions through. So I think you could do variations on the theme, but that at least I think that's a good place to start.
Great. Thank you for such a great answer. And you talked about ethics, which really shows that your whole root in philosophy study. So I thought that was really fun. So yeah, you talked about a little bit about like your own personal value in terms of like advancing social changes. Would you mind just I guess going a little bit more into like how you sort of incorporate your value in your whole career and in your whole academic study, and just how you sort of incorporate that in what you're doing?
Sure. I mean, in my life, I've tried to ask, a couple of questions. One is what matters to me, and another is what's interesting to me. And I find that people who can make those two things go together are going to have really successful, enjoyable careers. And I think one of the exciting things about the world we live in today is there's a lot of different ways to work on issues that matter to you, no matter where you are. There's a lot of people who work in my business, which is philanthropy, or who work kind of in the nonprofit / social good sector, who say, oh, well, I'm in this sector because I want to do good. Well, that's great, but that's not the only place that you can do good. There's a lot of ways to do good in the world. And it doesn't just occur in government or in the nonprofit sector. So one question is what matters to you? What matters to me right now are a lot of questions about the way that we consume information. So one of the reasons that I like working at the Knight Foundation isn't just that I get to give someone else's money away for good. It's that I get to work on these really challenging problems around information. The Knight Foundation was founded by Jonas and James L. Knight, who during their lives built one of the largest newspaper chains in the country. We can talk during the Q&A about what a newspaper is, depending on how old you are. But they were really committed to the idea that an informed democracy was a stronger democracy, would be a stronger democracy, and we remain committed to that. And I think we're at a moment where, thanks to technology like this, we have access to a lot more information than ever before, and we have access to a lot more disinformation and misinformation and obfuscation and confusion than we've ever had before as well. So that's something that really matters to me that I get to work on. I think another question that you've got to ask is, what's interesting to you? And I think that there are a lot of people who, what's interesting to them is high finance. What's interesting to them is corporate law. What's interesting to them is to figure out how to sell more cans of soda. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to find out if those things are interesting to you. What I hope is that no matter where you are, you feel that you can bring your whole self to what you do. And I hope that your whole self does include, some of the ethical commitments that I know make people want to be a part of this fellowship. We're actually, one of I think it's the 50th anniversary of Milton Friedman, the 20th century Nobel laureate economist, writing in Time magazine that the role of a corporation is to maximize shareholder value. And we're in the 1-year anniversary when a really important American trade association, the Business Roundtable, which is the trade association of major corporate executives, said we actually think it's stakeholder value, not shareholder value. This is the best time in the last 100 years to be, no matter what sector you're in, to be asking the question, how am I helping to solve the world's most complex problems? What's my role in doing that? And so I think it's also an exciting time for people like you, because I think there's going to be not only no career path closed off to you, there's going to be no career path that will fail to benefit from some of what's motivating you.
Yeah. Thank you for, going in so much, going in such depth in terms of like your answers. As like a business school student myself, I certainly am, very familiar with Friedman. his philosophy and, this whole sort of idea that business can definitely be used for good. And, like going into your work for a little bit more, you are sort of like overseeing the whole grant making process. And since we have a lot of like young leaders here who might, apply for a grant in terms of their projects or their initiative in the future, what do you think makes a grant application really sort of like phenomenal and competitive for success?
Sure. I think the sort of the evasive answer, but maybe I'll go into more depth, would be, the question you really should be asking is, what makes this project worth investing in? What makes me worth investing in? And if you're really clear about that, then sources of capital will be available to you. So I think, some really basic questions to ask yourself are, why is what I'm doing necessary to who I'm providing it for? Why will it be necessary? Who will it be necessary to over a period of time? Why am I the right person, or why is my team the right person to be tackling this? Why would someone trust us to be the ones to carry through with this solution? And do we have a plan to continue the impact, once the source of money that we're going to isn't there anymore? Most people who are investing in kind of what you'd call social entrepreneurship versus just incremental charity, they use words like catalytic. Like what they want to do is unlock some bigger change. They want to unlock some lasting change with their resource, the way that when an early stage investor in a company doesn't want to be investing forever. They want to invest at the beginning, and then they want to make more money at the end because they enabled something bigger than where the effort started. So that's one set of questions I think you should really ask yourself. And then a proposal that, whether it's in person or written, where those questions are clear and they come through to anybody, is definitely going to be a stronger proposal. I think a second question to ask is, why is this the right funder for me? And we're in a moment where I actually think there's sort of a little too much emulation of venture capital in all of our thinking. But one of the really important actually lessons of all private equity funding, and Maggie, this is maybe something you know about or you're learning about, is that those sources of capital really take seriously the match between the company that's being invested in and the company that's doing the investing. Both sides think really critically about that. The investor says, is this the kind of company I want to invest in to make money? And the company says, is this the right funder for me? Is this a relationship that's going to work and help me get done what I want to do? I think that's really important. And that's really compelling to a funder. I think whether you're investing in a social enterprise or you're investing in a for-profit enterprise, being able to go to an investor, not only answering that first set of questions, this is why this is an essential idea and why I can do it, but also be able to say, here's why I'm coming to you. Here's why I thought you would be the right person to invest in this, and to make that real, not to just sort of blow smoke, but to actually say, I really know what you do. I think I have a sense of how you invest and why you invest and what you bring to the people that you invest in, and that's the right stuff for me. And I think if you can answer those questions honestly, you're off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, and thank you for just sort of like touching upon sort of your perspective from someone who's like overseeing the grant making process. I think since we're just like we're still pretty young, it's kind of nice to hear someone that's like from the other side of the whole business and just hear really like their insights on that side. So I think it's really helpful. And I do think that like in sort of social impact investing, there should be more and more sort of like investor thinking more critically in terms of like what are the initiative and what are the goals that they care about, and also from like the young leaders perspective in terms of like whether they think this is the right sort of channel or this is the right platform or this is the right funder for them. So thank you for just sharing about that kind of perspective. And I guess another question that I have is that obviously you have like such an experience working in this field. What kind of advice would you give to someone like us who's really just like starting out their own projects and really just figuring out what is the cause that they care about and launching their initiative as the fellowship goes
on? I mean, at your stage, I mean, I think keep learning, have an open mind. I think this is not the time in life to be myopic and single-minded. It's the time in life to be to be driving ideas in order to learn, in order to meet new people, in order to confront new thinking. And so just don't be afraid to try on new pathways, to try on new ideas, to try on new networks and friendships. This should be an expansive and divergent time in your life. If the advice is, what's the best piece of advice for how can I get this one thing that I want to do done? I think, again, make sure you're your toughest critic and you're really clear with yourself. Why is this idea essential? And then just be as tenacious as you possibly can.
Great. Thank you for the advice. And I think everyone is super grateful to hear someone with such an enormous amount of experience just to talk about it. I want to kindly remind everyone to please send in your question via the chat box so we can sort of see who's asking the question and promptly select some, I guess, for the Q&A part. I guess one thing just out of curiosity from my part, because you sort of touched upon that for a little bit there. You talked about how you were really interested in sort of disinformation. What are some of the, I guess, just interesting projects or initiative that you feel is in this field right now? And just some exciting changes or progresses that you see in this field?
Sure. Well, there's no shortage of people trying to come up with different tools for helping us navigate, a digitally mediated information environment. And so, some of those tools are technology tools. For example, we worked with a company called NewsGuard, which gives ratings on different sources in your browser with regard to their trustworthiness. Some of those tools are analog tools. So we've worked with organizations that help to train newsrooms and civic organizations and nonprofit organizations how to spot and respond to misinformation, and how to make sure you don't accidentally amplify and further disseminate that misinformation. I think some of the most exciting work that I've seen is that researchers are beginning to develop methods for understanding this work. So many of you, if there's any of you who are in political science or in economics or in sociology or in journalism and communication or even in computer science and engineering, I bet there are faculty members, maybe you've taken these classes, who are now studying things like how networks operate and what the effects of network technology is on the way people think and interact with each other. And I think that's really important. The Sustainable Development Goals, for example, wouldn't really exist if you didn't have whole fields of study over the second half of the 20th century that were focused on this question of sustainability. Fields like environmental studies, certain subdisciplines in economics and political science, the development of human rights, particularly within the law. All of these these were new disciplines. They didn't exist before World War II, and we had to create them in response to our world. And then I think the last thing that I would see is that a lot of the big companies that have developed and maintained this technology, they're struggling too to figure out how their platforms ought to be operated to make sure that they're places where you can get information and you can find connection, which is the idea that they were built to enable, as opposed to places where you can get bullied and where you can get harassed and where you become misinformed or where your views become more polarized and more extreme. And over the course of I'm guessing a lot of you are kind of in your late teens, early 20s. Just over the course of the last 2 decades, we've seen both so many of the countries that I see represented are countries where we see the power of technology, to give people voice that never had voice before, to give people community and the power of organizing that they never had before. That's incredible. Just 10 years ago, we were celebrating the triumph of the internet as being a really critical catalyst in what we then called the Arab Spring. And now, we're seeing that not only can the same regimes that were being overthrown use those tools as an instrument of their authoritarian aims, but we're also seeing that those same tools are rending communities apart. And so that's just a long-winded way of saying that in addition to all the different kinds of work that can be done in civil society or in research or in government to try to restrain these challenges. I also think that, now these companies are going to need people like you helping them figure out what the solutions are to make sure that the technology is achieving, more good than harm. And that's been really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and thank you for going into that. I feel like for all the fellows here who are in the States right now, we do have like an election sort of coming up in 20 days. So there's never really been a time more like right now to see the power of like technology and sort of like misinformation and how that can sort of affect and influence our political process. Yeah, and so another question that I have and a lot of like our fellows have, as seen in the chat box, is that you were a Rhodes Scholar in 2008, and a lot of fellows here, they are sort of looking to sort of have this, I guess, similar fellowship experience after this fellowship. So I just do you mind just like talking a little bit about like how you sort of position yourself and like in such a competitive sort of like I guess just like selection process, and what kind of advice do you have for other fellows who are also interested in opportunities like these?
Sure. Yeah, I think happy to talk about that. And in fact, I came down from Oxford in 2008, and I actually became a Rhodes Scholar in 2006. So it was even longer ago. So this is all out of date information in a way. I guess I'd say a few things on fellowships like this. I know it's hard, but I think the sort of same principle applies as trying to get funding for your idea, which is like pick the fellowship that makes sense for you. The thing that you're applying to because you authentically want to take advantage of what this resource provides, or you're always going to make the best case. And there certainly were a Rhodes Scholarship is particular because you have to go to one university, and there were plenty of people who just didn't want to be at that university, and I thought that was a shame for a few reasons. I mean, I think one is I do think that hurts your candidacy. So there were plenty of people who were applying for that reason that didn't end up getting the scholarship. I think people who did get the scholarship, I sort of feel like that's kind of a waste of 2 years for them. Like if you get a Rhodes Scholarship, like you're probably going to do okay. And so why go spend 2 years in an academic environment you don't want to be in? And I think third, it obviously takes a spot from someone who really does want to be in that environment, for whom that's a really great opportunity. So I think make sure you're applying for the right thing and not just applying for the recognition. And look, I can tell you, there were people who were like in the Rhodes Scholarship is regionally allotted in the United States, and there were people in my region, because you spend the whole day together, who didn't get it, who are like tenured law professors at Yale University. Like it's gonna work out, even if you don't get these things. I think the second thing I think is like know why you're a candidate for the fellowship. Be really clear why you're a candidate and what your case is. There are people who were in that room who had achieved at an incredibly young age, amazing scientific breakthroughs. I wasn't that person. That wasn't the case that I was going to make. And I think pretending that I had done that wasn't going to be compelling. What was compelling, I think, ultimately to the people making the decision was what motivated me and what I wanted to do, and that worked for them. And so just make sure that you're true. You're true to yourself. And then I think do remain focused on where you're headed over a period of time. These fellowships and scholarships are just one pathway to get where you're headed, but there are many roads on the way to the different kinds of careers that you all might want to have. And I think it's also, like, I know this is kind of trite, but I think at your age, your view of what is even possible probably has some limitations. I was just talking to a couple journalists about a book they wrote, Susan Glasser and Peter Baker. She writes for the New Yorker, he writes for the New York Times, about a book they wrote on a political figure is way before your guys' time. His name is James Baker. He was a Reagan era official in the 80s in the United States. But James Baker is probably was the most powerful person in the world in the 70s and 80s. He ran 5 presidential campaigns. He was a cabinet secretary multiple times for different cabinet agencies. He was a Secretary of Treasury and a Secretary of State. He was Secretary of State during the fall of the Soviet Union. And James Baker was a prominent lawyer in Houston until he was 46 years old. James Baker was not 22 saying, I want to run a campaign someday, or I want to be Secretary of State someday. So, you don't have to have this all figured out, when you're 23. You can have it, you can figure it out a little bit later in life.
All right. Thank you so much for, the kind advice. And I'm sure that everyone, has like their own takeaway from this, but I think that has been very helpful overall. We're gonna go ahead and head into the open Q&A session, where I'm gonna call on the fellow who asked the question, and then we are just gonna go ahead and unmute you. So our first question is from Vasiliki. Let me go ahead and find her.
Hello everyone.
Hi, Vasiliki.
Hi. Yes. Hi.
Yes.
So
can you just go ahead and can you just quickly sort of introduce yourself, like which university you're at, what country you're at, and just and then say your question.
Okay, so I'm Vasiliki Stefanidi. I'm from Greece, the American College of Greece DOE. And my question is, how do we keep ourselves motivated even when sometimes things in our professional life or even personal life aren't so good and steady sometimes?
Sure. Yeah, fair question. And look, a question I unfortunately have to inform you, you'll be asking your whole life. This is going to be, there's obviously going to be setbacks. I can tell you, I don't know that I have the formula, but I can tell you, what's worked for me, in some periods in my life. So when I was your age, I was studying political philosophy as an undergraduate, and studying a lot of your forebears from the Attic period of Greek history, and I really loved that discipline, and I thought that I wanted a career in that, and I applied to a few elite PhD programs, doctoral programs in the United States, and I didn't get into any of them, and that was a real disappointment. I was a very good undergraduate student, and I was really excited about the idea of this career. Then 2 years later, I was able to get to Rhodes Scholarship. So in that period of my life, what I really tried to focus on was who am I going to trust? Am I going to trust some anonymous admissions committee at a doctoral program to tell me what I'm worth? Or am I gonna trust the people around me? And the people around me said, if you want a career in this, you can have a career in this. They also gave me really good advice. So by going to them saying, this was a blow and I still really want this career, I was able to get better advice about how to find a fit with doctoral programs, about how to build relationships with professors at those programs who would need to fight for me. So I learned a lot about what it would take to have the career that I wanted. So I think that's, there's sort of two pieces of advice there. One is where are you going to go to affirm yourself and who are you going to trust? And the second is, where are you going to get smart? If you're really passionate about something, are you going to find a way to get smarter about what you want to do? And then the other thing I guess I would say is that has worked for me is, I really don't believe in doing something you don't like to get to something you think you will like. I think that is really setting yourself up for disappointment. Some people do that. Some people take jobs for instrumental reasons. They take jobs they don't want to do because they think that they'll become the Secretary of State or whatever. And if you take that path, you just have to be ready for it not to work out. And I've made a choice that I didn't want to do that. And there are costs. There are costs associated with that. As a result, I'm not going to be the Secretary of State. I'm okay with that. But that's a price that I paid. So those are a few thoughts that I have. I think one of the great things about a community like this is that it's going to be a great community for this question. You're all going to have different kinds of strategies, but you'll be bound together by a lot of common ethics and a lot of common commitments to do good. And so I think this will be, my hope for you is that the alumni network of this fellowship will be, a great place when each of you are dealing with setbacks to help get back on your feet. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Sam. It really helped.
All right. Thank you, Sam. And I think it's certainly refreshing coming I want to say that a lot of like my peers are sort of thinking that they are going to go into a career that they don't actually enjoy, but there's going to be something better that comes from, like, I guess, just at the other end of the rainbow. And I think that's sort of like an assumed sort of path to go into, like people are going to think it's perfectly justified. So I think it's certainly incredibly refreshing just to hear like a professional say that they don't actually think it's the right way, the right path to go. So you know, thank you for saying that, and I'm really happy to like hear about that.
Well, I would just say too, like, I know we have to get to another question, but I mean, I would just say so first of all, I'm not saying there aren't going to be highs and lows. I'm just saying do something you really want to be doing. I think the other thing I'd say is I can just tell you, you know, I'm in my late 30s, and you know, it's really easy to say, oh, if I just do this thing, you know, if I'm a partner at McKinsey, or I'm a partner at a law firm, I've got this job in government, or I'm a blah, blah, blah in a corporation, you know, that matters. I've achieved something. And I can just tell you, if you're not happy, that feeling will not carry you. It just won't carry you. You still have to fight that. You still have to fight the feeling of external expectations. And that's a lifelong battle to figure out the balance between letting external expectations help you to be ambitious versus having them define you. But I can just tell you from experience, like, there's no job you'll get where for more than a day you'll say, my life is fine because everyone thinks this is a great job. A guy I used to work with, you know, was a senior advisor to the president of the United States, you know, and the president was comparing himself to other leaders. You know what I mean? Like, that game doesn't end. That treadmill has no end to it. So anyway.
Yeah. Great. So I'm going to go into the next question that is from Stavrola. Can you just sort of like go ahead and, you know, introduce yourself, like what university you're at, what country you're at, and then ask your question.
Hi, hello. I am Stavroula. I am also from Greece, from DRI, the American College of Greece. And I'd like to ask, we see many times that investment, especially in the corporate world, is driven from data measuring yield. And sometimes this is difficult in terms of social work. Do you think that there is a lack of data, and this could we possibly use network tools to measure results in social work and create more data?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, I think you know, easy answer is yes, we can and should. And you know, why is the social sector government behind? I think some of this is that well, I think there's a couple things. I think one is I do think we overthink, or we have an incorrect assumption about how data-driven the corporate sector is. So I'll tell you, you know, a lot of legacy industries just aren't where you know, the major technology companies are, even though they might be ahead of the nonprofit sector. But what are some of the reasons that nonprofit or government sectors are behind? I think some of the reasons have to do with the expense of building these systems and the expense of the talent it takes to build these systems. And again, I think an exciting thing about this fellowship is I bet we got a lot of people on this call who are studying either centrally or as a part of what they're doing, you know, fields of data science, fields of machine learning. And so putting those, you know, the fact that you want to work in these careers means that we'll be able to close some of those talent and technology gaps. I think some of the reasons we're missing this is that, you know, a lot of for-profit business is able to break the work down into kind of clear metrics, whether those are kind of cash metrics that can really be easily reduced, or production metrics. You know, so many big businesses are kind of making a thing. And that's true in a lot of social sector businesses. So a lot of the sustainable development goals, you don't have to, you know, when you're talking about, you know, alleviating hunger or achieving environmental impact, et cetera, I think you can do that. Other ones, it's a little harder to do that. And then some of it is cultural. You know, some of it is that you know, people kind of go into these fields precisely because they're not strong in those disciplines. So you know, look, answer is yes, and I see you guys as a big part of the solution.
All right. Thank you for the encouragement. Our next question is from Camila Castello. Can you just go ahead and, you know, introduce yourself, your university and your country, and then your question?
For sure. I am Camila Castillo. I am in Miami, but I'm Venezuelan. And my question, and I'm in FIU. My question for you is, like, in your experience, is it best to unite our efforts to big organizations and already going on projects, or start new social innovation through programs, community owned, like small and startups, like in a small version?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I'm in Miami too, so go Panthers.
Yeah.
Delighted to have a great FIU student on this call. I think look, the easy answer is, you kind of need both, right? I mean, I think when the justification for aggregation of effort usually has to do with coordination and scale. And the justification for new ventures is innovation. Innovation is really hard to do inside a big structure that's focused on coordination and scale. And coordination scale is really hard to do with lots of little efforts. So I think, one question you might ask is, what is the issue that I'm working on need? Does it need more innovation, or does it need more coordination and scale? And another question you might ask is, what do I like? There's going to be, no matter what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, there's going to be a need for innovation and need for coordination. And also, what's your disposition? Innovators need to be comfortable with a different level of risk. And sometimes we act like, the willingness to take risks is, the only thing that matters in the world. I just don't think that's true. I mean, I think that, really, really good people managers who know how to make coordination and scale work inside big bodies, are just as valuable. I mean, just a week ago, the World Food Program won the Nobel Peace Prize, and the World Food Program is been around for decades. The World Food Program is effective because it's slow and it's lumbering and it operates at scale. Do we need innovation in the way that we solve food security and insecurity problems in the world? Sure. But do we also need the World Food Program? Absolutely. So I think, I think there's great opportunities for both. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And I think that, like, one of the good things about this fellowship is that because it's so community-based, there's actually a lot more implementation on the ground that what we're doing. Maybe not right now because of COVID, but I think there definitely needs to be a lot of sort of community-based implementation of whatever ideas that we have. So our next question is gonna go to Julia Hill. You can just go ahead, say your name, your university, and your country, and then ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, Sam. My name's Julia. I'm from Australia, Griffith University, and I'm a Bachelor of Music student majoring in classical violin. So I guess I wrote down a question before, but I also thought of another question, so I'll probably tie them in together. But my first question was about how your Rhodes experience shaped your identity. And I guess my second question is, you mentioned about having the balance between using external expectations to motivate you, as well as following your own passion. So how have you personally managed that challenge throughout your life?
Sure, great, fair questions. What time is it in Australia? That's my question to you.
It's 12:43 a.m.
Who knows what day? Yeah. Well, thanks for staying up so late to join this conversation. And what an incredible testament to the power of technology. How did it shape my identity? That's an interesting question. I think the sort of duty bound to say that, I met my wife at Oxford. So, and we have 2 kids. So that's the most profound way it shaped my identity and my life. And, those are the 3 biggest joys of my life, which is, an easy thing to say, but also a really true thing to say. And that's part of life, right? Is that, every professional journey is also a personal journey. And who knows what you're going to take with you, or what someone else is, what ride you're going to be taken on, with someone else over the course of a life, based on the work that you do. I think, just to be totally honest, like, it did have a really big impact on some of these questions, because I think, there's a lot of danger to winning a lifetime achievement award when you're 23, and there's no question that there's a feeling that you maybe you have something to live up to. There's no question that you compare yourself to your contemporaries who also did that and what they went through. A Rhodes Scholar the year before me was this guy Pete Buttigieg, and I don't know how closely you guys follow United States politics, but he ran a pretty credible campaign for president this year, and I'm sitting there thinking, what am I doing? That guy's running for president. So there's certainly a little bit of a little bit of that. What I try to focus on is, I got this great opportunity to go study what I loved. I mean, I was a political theorist. I was working on early modern intellectual history, and I got to do that for 2 years, free of charge. It actually led me to think maybe I didn't want to be as involved in political philosophy at the time that I was. On the other hand, the skills that I developed around political theory have been really important to the work that I do now around these information topics that we've talked about. So a big part of my work at Knight Foundation the last couple of years has been investing in this new field of research that I was describing, that's helping to inform, what are the ethics of these technology tools. And I kind of think I'd be able to do that without that education. I think that I'm hopeful that that's really making a difference, or will make a difference in the world that we live in, the world that you guys live in, and will be leading sooner rather than later. So it certainly shaped my identity that way. And again, I don't have great advice about how you balance kind of external expectations. I think I will say, you guys are ambitious. Like you got this fellowship because external expectations do kind of matter to you. You want to be doing something that's important and that matters to the world, and that's okay. And I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, when is that ruling me as opposed to driving me and inspiring me? And that's a different answer, for everybody. That's definitely a different answer for everybody. So I'm probably not the most useful answer to your question, but I will say, you've kind of answered your question. If you can ask that, you can ask that question explicitly with people who you trust and who you care about, I think you'll find your way.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and thank you, Sam. I think it's definitely important, since that, I want to say that everyone is feeling pretty competitive these days, and it's just very sort of critical to keep a clear head in terms of where you are, and just not constantly hold yourself up in comparison to all the other people, because there's always going to be someone who's doing a better job at whatever it is than you. So just thank you for your advice on that. Our next question is going to go to Mikali. You can just go ahead and say your name, your university, your country, and then go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. My name is Mikhail Nyamoya. I'm the campus director at United States International University. That's in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm Kenyan as well. And the question that I wanted to ask the guest is, what are some of the life lessons that you learned through your experience as a Rhodes Scholar? I think it's always good to get 2 dimensions of the story, especially when it comes to such experiences. So yeah, I just wanted to know the life lessons that you've learned so far, especially with regards to that.
Sure. I think some of the lessons are the lessons you learn, no matter what you're doing when you're kind of in your early 20s. So, lessons about the value of hard work, lessons about the trying to be open-minded, meeting new people, building networks that you think can inspire you and help you do what you want to do. I think, again, this goes to the earlier question. I think a really important lesson you learn is you're not really done when you're 23. No matter what you're offered, no matter what opportunity you get, you're not done. It's really only the beginning, and then the scoreboard gets reset, and you've got to start over again, no matter what you do. I did learn a lot about what I was interested in and what motivated me. And I guess just unique to that opportunity, I mean, it was a chance to be in a global community, and I learned a lot about how different people in the world. It sort of goes to the very first question about ethics. I mean, we don't really have a totally shared ethical sensibility in this world, even if there's a lot of overlap. Certainly not in practice. And so, I was in school, 2006 to 2008, and if you're American in a global community, 2006 to 2008, you're having a lot of conversations about the role of American power in the world. You're having a lot of conversations about the role of military power in the world. New conversations about like ideas of what is terrorism versus activism, so to speak, versus resistance. And these are really challenging questions to have to talk about, as an American in another country. And that, and I'm not saying that's unique to America. I guess my point is, if you go to another country, you have to look at yourself differently. You are forced to look at yourself in a different way. And that was something I'm sure I knew theoretically. And certainly my undergraduate campus was by no means homogenous. But they're different when it's your friends and your colleagues who are posing these kinds of questions to you. And I think you guys may take for granted, like, you guys live in a very global world. I mean, look at this call. We've got like every time zone globally represented here. But that has happened more rapidly than you think. And so I kind of grew up in a world that was starting to make that transition much more quick. Like Skype was invented when I was in college. Anyway, thanks for your question.
All right, and thank you for giving such like a thoughtful answer. Again, I believe that since we're still like pretty young, it's very just helpful for us to hear the advice from someone who had a little more experience and time. So I guess I'm gonna close out with with last question that I have, and it's that how do you manage to launch a career in philanthropy?
Sure. Happy to answer that. First of all, since this is probably the end, I just want to say, Maggie, you've done an incredible job moderating this group of 123 people. So just thank you for managing this. I've had to do these myself, and it's no easy feat. And for the great questions that you've been asking, it's a real honor to have the chance to talk to folks who are already probably making incredible change, but who I know I'll be reading about on my embedded chip, or however we'll get information in 10 or 20 years. So, how do you get into philanthropy? I mean, it's kind of a weird career, right? I mean, it's insane to think that, something someone should get paid for is giving someone else's money away. So you didn't ask this, but I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend it, as a career. It's got to be for the right person. The way I got involved in it was pretty happenstance. I mean, I'm a big believer in kind of follow the person, not the job. So my first job after graduate school was with this guy I had known who had this tiny political consulting shop in Washington. It was just three of us. And I thought he was one of the smartest people I'd ever met. He seemed intrinsically interested in me. And so I thought, I almost don't care what the work is. I just want someone who feels invested in me to work with. And I'm a big believer in that. I found that, I've looked for that in every stop that I've made in my career. And so I worked with him, and we built up this practice of working with foundations that were trying to get more involved in public policy issues. And so I didn't really even know, what a foundation was beyond, if you live in the US, the taglines that you hear in the public media system, whether it's PBS or NPR, I had a vague sense, obviously, but I didn't really understand this world of institutional philanthropy. But I got to know these foundations, what they were doing, and I thought it was kind of an interesting combination of practically oriented work and being able to think about big problems. And I think you can hear I kind of like sitting around and thinking about big problems, and would take the opportunity to draw a paycheck to do that. And so having had a lot of foundations as clients, I actually my name started coming up in searches to work in foundations. And so my name came up in a search to work at a small part of Knight Foundation that was doing evaluation and assessment of the work they were leading. And then sort of through that, kind of worked my way up through night accruing responsibility over time. So it's more happenstance than anything. I think if what you really want to do is work in philanthropy, you do need to, my advice is you need to develop a little bit of topical expertise first, and then you can make a credible case to say that you'll be a smart investor. So there are some careers you can kind of make a lateral jump, and it's a little more complicated. But if what someone wants to do is to get into this work, you need to do that, or you need to befriend someone with a lot of money who wants to give it away, and then you can, then you can be the person who helps them to do that. And that is the way some people get involved in philanthropy. So.
All right. Thank you, Sam, for coming and, talk to us today. And thank, Noah and Kenny for organizing this whole thing. I'm just really like a small part of it. But I feel like they're doing the bulk of the work. And Sam, if you have like any sort of like closing remarks, anything that you want to leave us with, you can just go ahead and do that. And if you can share like also like ways that our fellows can stay connected with you in the chat box, like that's also great, in case they have any follow-up questions or anything.
Sure. Let me just quickly, everyone in meeting. All right. So I just dropped my email address there. So feel free to email me. That's the best way to reach me. And happy to talk to anyone further. It'd be helpful if I can. Look, my only closing thought is, again, thank you, Maggie, and just thank you all for what you're doing. It's your commitment to our future and our world is incredible. Again, as someone who lives with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, the challenges you guys are going to be facing down to give them a real chance are really profound. And I don't know that they're more difficult than the challenges we've ever faced in the world. It's sort of hard to say that when we're still not 100 years removed from cataclysmic global conflict. But they're really tough. And they will require an unbelievable amount of coordination. And the fact that you guys are explicitly committed to those challenges through the Sustainable Development Goals is incredibly inspiring to someone like me. So thanks for what you're doing. Get back to work. We need you. And if there's anything I can do to be helpful along the way, I hope you guys won't be afraid to reach out. And thanks to MCN for making this all happen.
All right. Thank you. And we should, all of us shall just take that lesson with us, as we go on to hopefully make more social changes. And for all the fellows, thank you guys for joining us. Hope you have like a good morning or afternoon or a good night's sleep wherever you are in the world. Quick reminder that we do have another webinar coming up on October 20th. That is about what is the role of philanthropy in our society. So if you guys really enjoy today's talk, or if you're just interested in philanthropy, make sure to also register to that. And yeah, happy Wednesday, everyone.